progressive overload is novelty of stimulus.
Yeah.
So when you go from one training system, Mountain Dog, to DC or vice versa, it's a novel stimulus. It's still weight training, of course, but it's something different. Both of those are hypertrophic stimuli, hypertrophic training regimes, but it's novelty. So progressive overload is novelty of stimulus.
Absolutely.
You got more reps with more weight or both.
That's the key right there. Absolutely.
Yeah. And a new exercise is novelty of stimulus. That's why a new exercise will make you sore when old exercises didn't. And a new training system that will make you sore in the right amount, novelty in the right amount.
Yeah.
Like you go and say, okay, today I'm going to go from DC and I'm going to do 100 rep sets on everything for 10 of them. It's like, okay, that's just stupid. That's not a smart jump to make.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Muscle Minds with Scott Stevenson. I'm Scott McNally. All of our programming is brought to you by TrueNutrition.com. You can use our code THINK for some additional savings. We are also brought to you by SupplementSource.ca for our Canadian people. And we're brought to you by Scott's book, Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach. You can pick that up at byobbcoach.com, or you can go to Amazon to get that, the hardcover edition. That's the one I would suggest to get. It's nice to have a book in your hands. You know what I'm saying? What's up, Scott?
Nothing much, man. We're going early today. This is cool. I dig it.
Yes. I'm glad to have some people here on the live feed here at Facebook. For the recorded version, this is coming out on YouTube. Guys, do us a favor, hit the like button, leave us some comments, and if you have not subscribed, I encourage you to, because we have several programs coming out each week, tons of different hosts, different types of content, all related to bodybuilding education, a little bit of entertainment in there too. Scott's got a question for us related to, it looks like it's going to be a training programming question. And I forgot we did have that Physique Critique. Somebody specifically asked for you. So I will dig that up as we get a little further into the show. We'll close the show out with that Physique Critique. That was from one of our Patreon guys. Speaking of which, guys, if you want to help support the program, check out Patreon. Think Big Bodybuilding. We'd love to have you over there. All right. Where are we going, Scott? What is this first question you got for us, man?
First, I have to apologize because I'm a victim of planned obsolescence in my computers. They're just like, I spent like an hour and a half today trying to get my monitor to work. It won't even start up in recovery mode, so that's bad. It's like there's no pulse. So thus we're stealing from my message board, and this is an opportunity for public service announcement.
Yes.
People, it's funny, it still happens, but I think it's just human nature. People ask me questions. If someone buys my Fortitude training book, they get lifetime Q&A on my discussion board as long as I'm doing things.
Hell yeah.
It's been going on for like 8 years. Yeah. So it's $20, and it's funny. I mean, literally, I answer the questions. Anyone who's been on there, they can confirm. Probably some people who are here now. I go into those. I spend an hour sometimes answering a single question.
I know. I've seen you do that, man. And that's and a lot of people are like, for instance, we've got Matt here who says, "Good morning, geniuses." I know a lot of people refer to you as like being a really smart guy, as I do too. But like you said, man, I see it. The reason that you are so smart is because you take the time answering those, as you've told me, answering those questions helps you to continue educating yourself, right?
Absolutely, man. So people can access that. They can access me. It's totally free. Like I have people who want to do consults. I'm like, dude, that's a simple. You bought the book. Like just ask the question. I'll type out your answer. You're good to go.
Yeah.
You don't got to pay me. Yeah. For what would be a 5-minute conversation or a voice message.
Yeah.
But I can give you all the details, like with the links and like what we're going to do now. If you want to pull that up.
Yeah.
It's helpful to see text sometimes. If we have a conversation and I'm explaining like the nuances of a program, if you can see shit, there you go.
Yeah.
It's much easier. So anyway, this is a question that was asked, started a few days ago, and someone was asking about frequency of training, and they want to change what's done in Fortitude training. It was kind of cool because it's years ago. For those listeners who are kind of OGs, used to remember and Skip would totally know about this because it was the constant thing. So there were the dog pound Nazis.
Okay.
Who would, with good reason too, they would jump on people who wanted to Like, I'm going to do dog crap training, but I want to do it different from the get-go.
Yes.
That's like, just follow it the way it's written. And I have said the same thing many, many times to people about Fortitude training, because not that I don't want people to, in fact, it's just the opposite. I want people to do whatever is going to suit them best for making gains or enjoying the program or what have you. But that if you do Fortitude training as it's written in the book, then you join the group of people who have all done that, had that same experience.
Yeah.
So if you've got to work something out, it's kind of like everyone's work on a 350 Chevy engine, you know, or a 7.3 Power Stroke or whatever. It's like everyone knows what that is. But if every mechanic all across the world worked on different engines and they had to kind of compare notes to see what their background information was every time, the communication wouldn't be that great. But you can, like, someone gets a mechanic gets an engine in and it's a well-known engine, and he's not quite sure what's going on. He can call his buddy who he knows is more experienced than him and say, hey, you know, what do I do when this starts happening to me on day 2 of Fortitude training or whatever?
Yeah.
Or the engine. So that's one reason why I suggest, and it's just, another analogy. This is like our overarching theme. Sometimes people will criticize coaches for putting someone on a generic diet when they're like not quite sure if someone has no structure.
Yeah.
So they just put them on, let's try you on this generic diet. We'll try this.
All you can do, you know?
Yeah. So, but people are like, well, he just gave me a generic diet. It's like, he's looking to, hopefully if it's good coach, he or she is looking to see how you respond to that diet.
Exactly.
So modifications can be made. So throw the graphic back up if you could.
All right.
And that shows Fortitude training in the basic version. I just kind of typed this out, so sorry for any typos. It's a 4-day-a-week program, and day 1, another typo. Day 1 is loading lower and pump upper, and day 2 is the reverse of that, so that's a typo.
Yeah.
Loading upper, pump lower.
Okay.
And then day 3, you do lower muscle rounds, basically. And day 4, and biceps, I think, is in there, and day 4, upper muscle rounds.
Yeah.
So that gives you training. You're training everything 3 times a week. Day 1's full body, 2 different styles of training for the upper versus the lower, heavy and then lighter. And the different set types are in there. And then day 3 and day 4, you're basically doing a lower upper. So that's the basic version. But you can see that is made up of sort of training chunks or training units in a way. So you could, if you want to flip it around, you could do day 2 first, start with the loading upper, sorry again for the typo, and pump lower, and then do day 1, and then come back and do day 4 and day 3. So you could go 2, 1, 4, 3.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
If you wanted to. So let's say, you've got day 1, the first day in this, or you want to have a day when you're best recovered, and that's when you want to do upper, because upper is what lags on you, and heavy upper is what you sense is really important because you're relatively weak. So you see that as something that's you could improve upon, and if you get stronger, you're going to get bigger as long as you're eating to some degree. It's going to happen. So you decide to flip things around and have the freshest day, your best training day of the week, given your schedule, with day 2. So you can just flip those days.
Yeah.
So the other option, and this is the next paragraph down there, the cluster of lines down there. This is what the question was about. It's like, is it okay to do this? And it's with lower frequency. And that basically is just a lower loading and pump. And this person was doing a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. Okay. Which is totally fine. Sometimes people who like to train on the weekends might go Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. Yeah. But this is a general kind of very typical spacing. So it's training everything just twice a week. So you're training lower on Monday and Friday, upper on Wednesday and Saturday. So that's another, and he was concerned that he was losing out, and this is what the follow-up question was about, is that you're losing out on frequency, which it is a change in frequency, and that one thing to think about, and this is important, is that the quality of training at the end of those sessions could be reduced. So let's say you start Monday with lower, You go hardcore with your legs. You do squats. You just literally go after it. And if you do that, let's say you're training at a certain training volume,
Yeah.
Then by the time you get to the end and try to do the pump sets, what you can do with those is going to be diminished. So at least from a tensile perspective, how much force you're producing, the stimulus will be less.
Yeah.
So what happens, and this is why people like I know Derek at one point was Oslin Weapon X was doing one of the twice a days, and his main reason for that was that he can be fresh, and have like that, fresh, clear mind, no fatigue that's accumulated during the training session, effect right at the beginning,
which makes
of
sense.
every workout. Yeah. My thought on that is that there's also a cumulative effect that occurs, and getting up for every workout, and its impact on sleep if you train late in the day, that can throw some people off. That hasn't ever worked for me, and it doesn't work for some people. But everyone is different, and there's different ways to skin this cat. So the interesting thing is that we've covered this in Muscle Minds 100, the 100th episode, where I talked about training.
Yeah, guys, I got to tell you too, if you guys haven't listened or watched those episodes, 100, 101, and 102 are probably some of our best episodes, I would say. And they really kind of culminate a lot of the things that we've talked about over the past 100 episodes, really, know, and it sums it up into a nice package. Those 3 episodes are probably some of our best, I think.
Yeah, so that's the study that showed that when they were varying volume and frequency at the same time, I'll just give a short version.
Yeah.
Some people did better with a higher volume and frequency. People did better with lower volume and frequency. So not everyone's the same. So it's interesting, the mindset here, and this is just human nature. This is how we are. And this is Fortitude training takes advantage of the potential benefits of higher frequency training.
Yes.
So it's 3 times a week. It's a high frequency training program, but that's not the best for everybody. And that's what that study demonstrated. The follow-up, when they looked at the individual responses and clustered them and saw that 1/3 did better with higher frequency versus lower and higher volume too. And then 1/3 was the other way around, and then 1/3 didn't really matter.
After doing all these shows with you, Scott, and I truly, and then experimenting in my own training, I truly do believe too that part of it is related to like, what were you doing going into that? You know what I mean? Like is high frequency good? Well, yes, but what were you doing before that? If you were already doing really high frequency, then maybe you would do better than, maybe that guy would be one of the people that on the charts and graphs would be like, hey, lower frequency works better for him. You know what I mean? It's like, that's a factor. It's not like am I right that it's just not black and white, that like, even the same person, I guess is what I mean, is some guy who's been doing the bro split for all of his training. Maybe he'll be a guy that does better with high frequency. Maybe not, but maybe he would. And then maybe a guy who's doing higher frequency, maybe, taking a break from it could even be beneficial. Just hitting everything once a week.
Your buddy Mike Mentzer was someone who was criticized back in the day because he would take on. This is like, folks won't remember this. Maybe the HIT advocates or people who have been in that camp might remember that one of the arguments wagered against his training was that he was taking people who were doing high volume, doing too much, who were overreached, and all he was doing was basically pulling back enough so that they could realize the gains that they had accrued, so to speak, the deposits in the gain tank that they'd made up until that point. And there's something to say for that.
Yeah.
There absolutely is. We talked about that before on the show. There's a particular study out of Norway where they just overtrained the bejesus with a high frequency blood flow restriction type of regime, and then they saw growth that occurred like 20 days after the last regimen. Yeah, so like that was pretty cool. It took a long time for it to manifest. So it gives you an idea of the time scale where, like, literally, like, you might be where you've done 6 months of a training program. Let's say you got an extended off season and you're not going anywhere, and you simply change to something that allows you to recover, and you set in motion satellite cells and all the various processes that underlie hypertrophy, and You simply are literally realizing those things that you could have maybe even stuck with the same training regime and just cut your volume in half and done a deload.
Yeah.
But you switch programs because you're maybe psychologically so burnt out, and maybe you go to a higher frequency, lower volume. So you go from mountain dog training to DC training, and you start making progress.
Yeah.
Both of those are effective programs. We know that. But you're like, wow, DC works so much better for me than mountain dog. And it's like, yeah, but it's contextual on a time basis.
Yeah. But
what you did during mountain dog prepared you for the gains that you made in a certain way. It sets you up for this.
Yeah.
For the gains you make during DC training.
And I think it's important just to recognize that little tidbit. I don't want to go too, I didn't know I kind of like swayed us. That's a sidebarred us a little bit there.
Yeah.
But I wanted to just kind of throw that out there because I know that that's something that you're not saying that this is black and white, but in general, it makes sense. You've told me higher frequency, every time, and it's the way I've explained it to others after hearing you say it, that every time that you can train and recover, you've triggered growth. So a guy in general who say trains twice a week trains everything twice a week. He could say, try to bring his back up. Would you do better with 104 sessions per year or 52 sessions per year? Assuming you can recover. So it makes sense. So you're telling us, so in general, what you have going on with Fortitude is that everything is going to get hit in some fashion 3 times.
It's more frequently. Yeah, that's the basic version.
Yeah.
There's a turbo version where you hit everything 4 times a week.
Okay, that's a lot.
And basically, only difference between those two is that you're just distributing the volume over 4 days versus 3 days. So the muscle rounds on which normally be kind of lower upper pattern, you're just doing a lower with a little bit of upper on one day, and then you do upper with a little bit of lower the next day. So it's very different what most people are used to.
Yeah, it is.
So here's the thing. And that logic does make sense. Like the more times you can turn on a hypertrophic stimulus and recover, the better. So 104 is better than 52. There's definitely something to say for that, especially when you look at it through the window of the protein synthetic response, which is going to last a day or two at most, and it becomes less the more adapted to training, the more trained you become. But on the long haul, too, we've also got this progression of satellite cells where they undergo their processes to incorporate themselves as nuclei into a growing fiber based on this satellite nuclear domain idea. So you need more nuclei in a cell that's bigger because the cell's so gigantic, it just needs those nuclei to govern those domains, those areas within the cell. So when you go and train and you have, you're creating tremendous tensions in those cells and you're turning on energy turnover. Like when you get really, really sore, and this won't be happening for someone who's been training regularly because they got a protective effect. You're not getting diabolically sore, but this goes back to the topic of soreness. There's even a study showing that with like 1,000 after it was a exercise soreness or muscle injury protocol, that even like 1,000 grams of carbs over the 24 hours after that bout did not replenish glycogen at all.
Wow.
Yeah, and some of that is probably because maybe those mechanisms are just so disrupted.
Yeah.
And some of it is the energy turnover. The fact that the incoming energy is being used to repair rather than being stored. It's going right where it needs to be, right where it needs to be used. So if you think about what's going on, and this is always sort of intrigued me when you think about a muscle cell that in the long haul is going to have to rebuild itself. So let's say imagine it's a house. We use a little bit different analogy this time. And you're adding rooms to the house, and each room has to have a space heater because you've got no HVAC in there, no centralized. So you've got to have a space heater or maybe an air conditioner. That's your nucleus for each room. So the bigger the house, the more the rooms, the more space heaters you have. And in order to do that, That's not just a simple process, just plop it in there. You got to set up some electricity to go in there. So there's some organizational process. We're talking about putting a nucleus into a muscle cell. So there's a lot that goes on with the proliferation and differentiation of those satellite cells, so they can go from just kind of lurkers who are waiting to be called into action to being active nuclei residing within a muscle cell. So, but the stimulus for that is disruptive. So what's telling the guys in the house that they need to build another room, make the muscle cell bigger, and build out the electrical to accommodate these new nuclei, the heaters, is disruption of the house, like an earthquake.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's kind of what's going on when you're traumatizing the muscle. You're creating a form of muscle injury through the extreme exertion of lifting.
Yeah.
So what are these guys? How does that impact their ability to do that? Like if they're in there like shaking around and they're trying to like hook the electrical up, literally you've got such a disruptive and energetically expensive process you set in motion to turn on the muscle growth. If you're doing too much of that, and let's say you're not actually you're not giving enough time after a session for those heaters and air conditioning units to be plugged in and the rooms to be built, because you've constantly got earthquakes going on, you never build those rooms. And that's the interesting thing that seems, and that's been demonstrated in the research we've covered, that people who grow the best end up, in one particular study I'm thinking of right now, they have more satellite cells to begin with, and they have a more robust response in terms of the satellite cells. So they just simply got better workers who are able to deal with that aspect of muscle growth.
And you see it too. You see it in their lives, like long before they get into bodybuilding. Those are the guys that when you're 16 and you're in the locker room, they already have the cap delts and they're not really training that much. You know what I mean? They've already got the development.
Sometimes.
Yeah, well, okay, maybe not always, but you do.
Yeah.
Like, those are the guys that I picture when you say that, at least. You know what I mean? The guys who already had biceps when they were 14.
There's like constitutive expression, like where you are in the untrained state.
Okay.
So like you see this like an easier kind of example is in endurance athletes or endurance individuals with good endurance, and they have a high maximal oxygen consumption, the VO2 max.
Okay.
And some people are just like, they always were good at run. They could always sort of outrun everyone,
Yeah.
you know, or even sprinters. They're always good sprinters. And then when they train, they adapt really well. They're kind of set up for that.
Yeah.
But with like, just kind of talking about this yesterday, actually, Nick Walker, for instance,
Okay.
posted a Transformation Tuesday or whatever it is, whatever you know, people whatever they call those days, but it was so super impressive. It was one of his early shows, and you see and he was on stage and he was in shape, but he looks like he transformed his skeletal structure, which has obviously adapted to all the training things he's doing. But you would look at him and never expect that he could become what he is now as a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
So he didn't have that appearance.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have ever guessed that. You would have thought, okay, this guy's got, you know, mediocre average genetics, and he's got amazing discipline, amazing drive. He dots every I, crosses every T. This guy lives, breathes, sweats, shits, bleeds bodybuilding.
Yeah.
Obviously. So this is no way is diminishing his work effort, but he has to have. He also I know guys who've done that as well and don't grow and don't look the way he does.
Yeah.
So he's got at least some good genetic potential, but it wasn't so evident.
Yeah, we've seen those guys for sure.
Yeah, so there's that. So it's hard to say. That's what's so interesting.
Huh.
So, but anyway, back to this frequency thing. So
Yeah.
we know, like a lot of the best bodybuilders, they do the bro split or the pro split.
Sure.
We talked about this before. That seems to be explained the way my theory on that is they have such a robust satellite cell response, which tends to last, I think, like 5 days based on the single study that they've been able to find.
Okay.
If you look at PAX7 plus is a nuclear marker of what's going on with those satellite cells when they're becoming nuclei. That seems to last like maybe 5 or 6 days. So you can train once every 5 or 6 days, and you set that process in motion, and that's good. If that process, that's all you need is one training session. You let it run, because then the satellite cells have done their magic. They're where they need to be. That's good. But maybe you're someone who isn't who does better with a higher frequency regime, as many people do, you're not as genetically gifted, you may need to like turn on those satellite cells more regularly with a higher frequency regime.
Which makes sense.
And here's the trick, is getting enough of training in, which could just be one set actually, but enough of a stimulus, but not too much. So let's say you do 2 sets or 3 sets that are all out, like a DC training style type of thing. It's rest pause sets are kind of hard to wage or gauge against straight sets, but not everything's a rest pause set, obviously in DC. But you've turned on those processes. But if you just double that, would more be better? No.
Right.
And you might even be able to feel like you recovered from that centrally and hormonally. You just could go in there and do that. And I've done this for years, just done way too much. Oh,
sorry, I had to bring a little guest on the show here.
There's a little lover.
She was by my feet.
Little fluffy lover.
We'll see how long she stays here.
Yeah. So, sorry, dogs twist. Totally
I knew it was going to happen, but like she was at my feet for 5 minutes. So I was like, okay, she's coming on the show.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Sorry to detract.
So, but if you do too much, then all you that's junk volume basically, and all it's doing is incurring energy demand that can take away from the growth process.
Yeah. Hey,
so back to sort of where we started with this. One of the last post, I didn't paste this in for you, but he just sort of said he has the sense, it just sort of feels weird to him to train like, I think he had his day 1 and day 2 of Fortitude training like bunched together. It's like Monday and Tuesday. So he'd do loading lower one day and pump the very next day. That just didn't feel right to him.
Yeah, I could see why too.
And I really suggest people have at least a day between day 1 and day 2, just for the recovery reasons.
Sure.
But doing that, you may have you maybe just shooting your own progress in the foot, because you've set all those processes in motion, and then you incur another damaging bout and drain glycogen, especially if it's pump sets.
Yeah.
So you're basically use up a bunch of energy, and like your workers are just starting to build out that new room, and they're about to like plug in the air conditioner or the heater that the room needs. And you have another earthquake. It's like, oh fuck, they were almost there.
Yeah.
Whereas someone who's got the genetic gifts to recover more rapidly, they've got better workers, they're more efficient, they've got more of them, and they could do that. They could get it with a higher frequency regime, or maybe even a higher volume, and just let the process run, because they've got their workers. They just say, okay, guys, the foreman stops in, the contractor stops in and says, okay, do this week, guys. I'll be back next Monday.
Right.
They just work on their independent workers. They go to town. Whereas the genetically stubborn, this is just a theory. It's definitely hardly anything black and white, especially in a soft science like exercise science. But they may need a contractor who's like, oh shit, McNally may be stopping by to make sure we're still doing what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
So you keep them in order, keep them in line, but you can't be too much. So you stop by and you just kind of like, let's say you got like a remote earthquake simulating thing. So you just give them a little earthquake, just a little one.
Yeah.
So keep them working. Like, we got to keep building rooms. Like, we need to have this so we have shelter. But if it's too much, then you could shoot yourself in the foot and disrupt the whole process.
Sure.
So it's totally okay for someone. I mean, if you look at the frequency literature, 2 to 3 times is maybe where it's hard to say, but there's so variable. And I've got another important thought on this, which I've talked about before, but it's really important. It's so hard to say like what the best frequency is, but it seems like it's more than maybe 1 per week for the average person in those studies with newbies. And
just in my experience, I feel like that's absolutely true.
Yeah. Some people like a push-pull legs is more than 1 time a week. If you're doing like, 3 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off, or something like that, you're getting close to 2 times a week. So 2 to 3 is the sweet spot, maybe for the average person. But here's the thing in taking things from those studies, and this is why one of the reasons why I think you see so much variability across studies in terms of like what's best. It's because your ability to adapt to a given training regime is a function of exactly what you said earlier. How long you've been doing that regime. So I've seen this in a couple studies. If you make a midpoint, like let's say it's a 16-week study, the presumption is that we're going to do before and after, and then and that will give us a snapshot. Imagine the difference between taking a picture of someone when they're starting a set and a picture when they end the set, versus a video of the whole set.
Oh yeah, it's a very different thing.
Totally different type of information you get. So some people may be doing really well and growing really well with the stimulus applied for the first 4 or 6 weeks of a longer program, and then they keep trying to do that, and neurologically they're learning how to train harder, especially if they're newbies, like it's often. So they're creating a different type of stimulus, and you're starting to accrue quote unquote fatigue. Your recovery abilities can start to wane as you go through, and then what happens the second half, you may even be overtraining or regressing or making no progress. So you have a great program in the right amount for the right duration of time, that you throw out the baby with the bathwater, because your end progress shows only what you accrued in the first 4 weeks or what have you in terms of muscle size. So some people could keep on growing. Some people could grow and then actually go reverse directions if they keep doing too much. And that's what smart auto-regulation could fix for you. So back to what you said about, what you did before the program dictates what happens, is absolutely. Even with the same training program, you could have an effective program in the right amount. You keep on using it, and it's too much, then you're overreaching. You're not going to go anywhere.
You know what I really think I appreciate now out of Fortitude is that there's you almost have like with your pump sets, as you call them, or the pump rounds, the pump days, pump sets. Those activities, they don't allow you to push into like destroying your central nervous system as hard. It's a different type of stimulus, and the way you've built the muscle round, you don't, and I see it now. The first time I tried to do a muscle round, it was on a V squat. Yeah. And so the concept for anybody who's watching and listening that doesn't know what a muscle round is, it would be, is it 6 sets of 4?
Looking for 4.
With a 10-second, basically 10 seconds or 3 breaths. Between
5 breaths is the number I use.
Okay. So about 10 seconds, right? Yeah. So it's not as long as, say, like a rest pause. And the big point that I missed was that you only fail one time. So 4 consistent reps without stopping, and then the break, and then 4 consistent reps. And that if you do that and you follow it the way Scott has put it together, you don't have the opportunity to turn it into like a widowmaker where you're using every last ounce of your entire psyche to push the weight. The muscle will fail first. And when the muscle fails and you only let it fail one time, you walk away from that set not destroyed. So you can get through a muscle round really like tearing into the muscle, but not destroying your whole body in the process. So I like that, because it's what makes that nice is because when we say like high frequency 3 times a week, if you're just crushing it 3 times a week on a body part, I think that most people couldn't handle that. But it's also a different kind of stimulus, like something I've been looking at more was after I looked at the avalanche plan that John has. It's a push-pull legs, but the first round is push-pull legs, heavier progressive, and then the next round is more of like a pump type exercise. Right. You don't have the opportunity to like kill yourself as hard, and I think that we need that. It's like a different type of stimulation than just heavy progressive overload. And a year ago, I would have just said like heavy progressive overload is the key, and I still think it is. Right. But there's more. You can get more. There's still more to be gotten beyond just progressive overload, isn't there?
Yeah. Two thoughts. Funny that you said that, because that's the thing I said that I wasn't the thing we talk about today, but that's in my last response on that thread, which you just touched on. But the magic of not making a muscle round or a pump set into a widowmaker is that the reps are continuous.
Yeah.
So you were doing like super long, like,
I
you
do a
were a
rep,
hero's
guys.
pause,
Yeah.
like
Here's
8 seconds,
pause.
12 seconds. Yeah, I'm going to go until I got nothing.
Yeah.
And you can stand there and like waver with the weight and maybe and those are the grinders that will just tear your nervous system down.
Yeah.
That's disallowed in fortitude training.
Yeah.
And it's actually kind of a different kind of discipline. It was difficult for me because I was so used to doing widowmakers and grinding out sets like that, where you manage your fatigue as you come close to what would be the failure point of the set, and instead of failing at 10, you get 13, or instead of failing at 12, you get 20 because you're a widowmaker.
Yeah.
Well, you can only get there's a stimulus. There's a benefit and there's a negative to that.
Yeah.
Those reps
Exactly.
are awesome, but they tear into your nervous system.
Do that
So
3
the
times a
idea-
week. You're going to have problems on the same muscle
even
group.
just psychologically knowing you're gonna have to go in there and do that.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, it's like, okay, I did my heavy. I'm going to go through today. I'm going to do the heavy upper. I'm looking to progress, beat the logbook, and then the pump sets. The way I've set them up, they could be, people like to do it different ways, but those wouldn't be progressively overloaded at all. Those would be literally go in, reconnect with the muscle, focus on the pump, maintain continuous reps, do what you feel. You start and pick up the weight, and you move the weight back and forth to create metabolic stress in a pump. Just like you're backstage, literally, but a really effortful one without pausing to try to crank out reps, because the numbers don't matter. And I have those different techniques to do it. But so the interesting you said is, and this is what I can't remember exactly. I could go and look, but this is what was a second poster in that thread. I just responded to him, I think yesterday. And I said, you can reconfigure those things any way you like in terms of the frequency and volume. So instead of do like a upper one day with the loading and the pump, and then lower the next 2 days later, loading and pump. And if that for you means that, and this is just my general big picture, the big stones take, if that means that you become the best badass in the gym that you can, meaning your ability to do incredible things in the gym, your performance improves, and you're eating enough to grow, then that's going to manifest in your growth.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that doing things like what Charles Glass does with people can't bring up weak muscle groups.
Sure.
With a mind-muscle connection and a focus, or doing what Dante calls getting funky with it, where you have to figure out how to do an exercise that puts what you tend to neurologically activate as opposed to what you want to target during a muscle is put at a disadvantage. So you do an exercise for chest that doesn't allow you to use your delts or your triceps. You come up with like I've got scoop flies, dumbbell scoop flies. People can find a video of that. If you've got healthy shoulders, that one will just destroy your chest, and it's very, very unique.
Scoop flies.
People do scoop flies. Yeah, there's a YouTube video people can watch. They'll dig it. It's a monster.
Yeah,
and it's very, very cool, and it's all pec oriented. There's no triceps at all.
Okay, nice.
Somersault squats or Smith sissy hacks.
Oh yeah.
Those target the quads. People think, oh, what's a quad isolation exercise? Let's do knee extensions, or maybe sissies. You can do sissy squats like a hack squat.
Yeah.
Well, those are two other options that people can use that are totally new and different. And and here's the thing. And this is why what you said, Scott, was genius. Really, those are at least. Well, I guess I'm saying that because I agree with it. But it was insightful, maybe in a way like you weren't even really sure of. At least the way I'm sort of seeing is that progressive overload is novelty of stimulus.
Yeah.
So when you go from one training system, Mountain Dog, to DC or vice versa, it's a novel stimulus. It's still weight training, of course, but it's something different. Both of those are hypertrophic stimuli, hypertrophic training regimes. But it's novelty. So progressive overload is novelty of stimulus.
Absolutely.
You got more reps with more weight or both.
That's the key right there. Absolutely.
Yeah. And a new exercise is novelty of stimulus. That's why a new exercise will make you sore when old exercises didn't. And a new training system that will make you sore in the right amount, novelty in the right amount.
Yeah.
Like you go and say, okay, today I'm going to go from DC and I'm going to do 100 rep sets on everything for 10 of them. It's like, okay, that's just stupid. That's not a smart jump to make. But going from a lower rep to a higher rep regime makes sense.
Yeah.
So I tried to kind of optimize that in a certain way with fortitude training and having having all set types that were all across all higher and lower rep ranges within the the reasonable boundaries of not being too light and of course not going too heavy, where you're really not getting much of a growth stimulus because the volume of the set is so low. It's just too dangerous.
Nate Spear said something on Blood, Sweat, and Gear the other week that I thought was just such an important statement, and I really tried to bring attention to it. But he's a guy who trains really intense, very heavy, very progressive with his training, and kind of to the point that we're talking about here. He brought in more volume in the past year. He changed his physique. Really, he did some great things with his development. For a guy who already was quite advanced, he was able to bring his legs up even more this year. And he said, as much as I feel like I am a really intense guy, how many of us really are training truly as intense as Dorian did? And he said, maybe I did have a little bit more room. And he felt that to get that extra bit that he needed, he added in more volume. So he pushed, and that in itself was a new stimulus, right? That he added in different rep ranges, more sets, stuff like that. And I think that's so important, man. I would say in the last couple years with me having come to really understood what progressive overload is, and have really latched on to, we've talked a lot, especially in this program, about like Mike Mentzer and about DC, about HIIT, about just high intensity techniques. If there's any disservice in that, it's that I think there are some guys, a lot of guys that have followed this, a lot of guys that are doing the top set, back off set mentality of training that aren't quite getting enough now out of their training because they're not able to push to the level that it really takes to get everything out of that muscle, and that they could be serviced by a little bit more volume than they're doing. Yeah.
And you can make up for lack of quality, so to speak, with quantity to some degree, without a doubt.
Takes some humility to recognize that, though, right? To be like, hey, even though I just destroyed it on this, maybe there was a little bit more that I'm not even aware of,
The interesting thing too, and I'll just pull from my recent experience this year was, so I've had many off seasons and many pre-contest periods, over the past 20, 25 years of doing that. And so I know what I have to do, for instance, how things have to be different to be able to recover and hang in there and still train hard when I'm 4 weeks out, and running on fumes, et cetera. So I've picked up some techniques for maximizing my recovery, and everything from just in that case there's no food, because but you have to pay attention to make sure your sleep is good. I will try to sleep in as late as I can.
Yes.
For me, the last sleep cycle is the most important one, for instance.
Okay.
Being dead on with my inter-workout nutrition. There's a bunch of things, but I took some of those lessons, and when Derek and I did mountain dog training this last year, and I knew that was too much for me. I knew that with volume was too high because I knew how hard we were going to train.
Yeah.
I knew how much fun we were going to have. And I knew that I was going to have to do everything I possibly could to recover. And that's when the cereal gains thing started, actually.
Okay.
Because I knew I had to put a whole box of cereal in for sure.
Yeah.
And
when Oscar was trying to keep up with Kai. You remember those days?
Yeah.
Oscar was trying to keep up with Kai, and he got a little beat up in the process, I think, too.
Yeah, it happened to me years ago when I first trained with Dave Henry.
Yeah.
Because when we very first started training, Dave had just gotten his pro card.
Okay.
And we had met in the gym, and he's the pro, so we trained with him. He was doing let's see what he's doing, Yeah. And I was like, this is just cool. And I think I've told this story before, but so Dave was stronger than me. And eventually, I caught up to where I could beat him by a little bit on legs. Almost most of the time, he would always beat me on chest. There was only one time after he was recovering from a hernia surgery, I beat him on one day.
Hey, but you got him. You got him
one
that
day. Yeah, and that's because he left 8 reps in reserve. He was trying not to blow out, his surgical repair.
I don't care about that part.
But
I just care you beat
him. Yeah, but I got him. Back, we were pretty close, but at that point we weren't.
Okay.
And so he would do a set, 12, 15 reps, and maybe because we're planning on doing 15, 20 sets, and he'd have 3 or 4 reps in reserve, because he was, pacing himself. His intensity and volume were balanced so that he could recover from that. And he was just stronger than me, period. But I could match those reps if I did a Widowmaker every set, which I did.
Yeah, you did. Of course
which
you did.
I paid for.
Yeah.
Which I fucking paid for. I'm like, there's no way. Like, there's just too much fun. It's like, there's a golden chalice. I could beat him on this on this set if I do that. So if he went first, man, and of course I would try to like proactively beat him.
Yeah.
If I ever went first. And I was an absolute wreck. My whole, like literally I had, like we'd finish a workout and my whole body would just ache. Almost to the point I was almost like just the tears would just from the pain itself would just start flowing down. It was just total full body inflammation everywhere.
Dude, when I trained with Shelby, 3-hour back days, I would leave that feeling like I had the flu. Like my face, I would have I think it was like an autoimmune response where like my skin would get really cold. Even though
it's probably not autoimmune, but definitely immune.
Something. I'd get really cold and I would lose my appetite for like 3 hours and I'd feel like I was like I had the flu, basically. Feel like best way I could describe it is it felt like the way you feel after you get in a car accident. Every Wednesday back day. Right. I don't know why I didn't grow the way I wanted to.
No shit, right? Right? Yeah. So anyway, but it's the novelty of stimulus, that really matters here, and you can do that in so many different ways. So you can take someone, and this is what I said. I'm remembering now what I posted in that thread is that you can, you can have situations where you bring up a weak muscle group that hasn't been responding from progressive overload by using different kind of what people would think of gimmicky exercises. They're not your bread and butter exercises. You probably want to keep those in. And the exercises that don't necessarily lend themselves to progressive overload. And here's a very simplified reason for why the progressive overload might seem like it's failing us to some degree. So let's say, just keep the example, the simple same one. So let's say it's chest. You should have a hard time. Chest isn't the prime mover on most pressing or chest movements, traditional chest movements for you, because you tend to activate with your delts and your triceps.
Okay.
That's just the way you're biomechanically inclined, neurologically inclined. You're just wired up that way. So when you would indeed get more reps or use a heavier weight for most of your exercises, that is primarily going to be a function of what you could consider a poor mind-muscle connection or just a natural tendency to activate those other muscles. So you're basically getting a training overload in the muscles that look really big and great because those are the strong ones that you tend to naturally activate. Yeah. So what you have to do then is just throw away the idea of getting more reps, because what you're getting more reps with a given weight with or more weight is you're tossing out the mind-muscle connection. This goes back to, we've talked about this previously in the podcast. So you have to literally, in order to prevent yourself from defeating your own purpose, stop logbooking stuff. Do pump sets. This is one reason why I have them in there. Do a pump style set where your only intention is, imagine you're going on stage and all my delts are already oversized compared to my chest. I don't want a delt pump. I want only a chest pump. So I do my push-ups. I'm not like trying to do 100. I could do 150 push-ups straight in a row, let's say. Someone could. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to do these push-ups in a way that only allows me to get 20 of them, because I'm going to not use my triceps as much as possible. No delts. And then it's so 20 obviously pales in comparison to 150 in terms of performance of what is a push-up. Yeah. But the purpose is to provide the stimulus that you're looking for. So in order to make sure you do that and you keep yourself to what your intention is, you have to throw away the progressive overload and do something. And it's going to be totally novel too. That's the thing. One of the reasons why there's various theories as to what causes muscle soreness, but one of them is that there's a neurological, like, skill learning phenomenon underlying what happens between the first time you do a movement and you get really sore, and the next time you do it and you don't get so sore. I think there's some EMG data suggesting a change in activation. I don't know how well this has been explored, but that's one of the primary suggestions. So it's basically the first time you pick up a weight, you're doing exercise, you're shaking and you're uncoordinated and the bar path is just all over the place. And then when you get really good at movements, things look much more smooth and you're very coordinated. So there's something going on there, which means you have a different type of activation pattern that's less damaging the second time around. At least that's one of the theories. So the novelty of stimulus is a function of the activation pattern. So now imagine you go from your pressing movements, which you've honed over years to be basically a delt and tricep movement with the chest kind of hanging in there.
Right.
Because you're not naturally pressing with your pecs as the prime mover, at least the way you want, and maybe you can't, to an exercise that feels really weird because you're disallowing any advantage to come in what normally would be when you're doing some sort of a chest movement. So you're doing this chest movement and your delts are out of the picture, your triceps out of the picture, and it feels really awkward, but you have to have a mind-muscle connection. You basically are going to have that activation pattern of the someone who's just doing something for the first time, which is going to be a stimulating one and potentially a damaging one. So you're basically trying to work around the nervous system efficiencies, which you've accumulated through acquiring skills, and they were probably just built in to match your biomechanics, maybe even your fiber types, the relative size of those muscles that you developed having over the course of growing up to get to the point where you started training.
Yeah.
So yeah, you want novelty, and that's progressive overload's novelty. New exercises are novelty. Change in program is novelty. So novelty is the name of the game, because if you keep doing what you've been doing, you keep getting what you've been getting. As
that
Ronnie
is so
said.
true. That is so true, isn't it?
So do something new if you want to get something new.
I like that.
Yeah. Ronnie basically told us what we need to do.
What do you say? So I don't think we really have enough time, Scott, to talk about pumps. Or excuse me, about squeezing. I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
That was a topic I wanted to get into today. I don't think we really have enough time for that. Is there anything else you wanted to make sure we covered on this topic before we moved on, though?
No, I'll just say the kind of the main things, like stepping back. Like, what do you do with what we just rambled about, or what I just rambled about? Is if you try a new program because you're not getting where you're going with the one you're on, then do it as written and see how that works for you. But also don't be afraid to adjust and auto-regulate to suit what is to be your something that matches your recovery levels. So, but I think it makes sense to follow it as written at first for a while.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can be surprised. Sometimes it can be like with Nate. Nate's like, if I keep doing what I've been doing, I'll keep getting what I've been getting. So he's like, I'm going to try more. Yeah. And he figured out a way to recover from that. Obviously. Yeah. He probably had in his mind, if I do more, then I'm not going to recover and I'm going to backslide. Mm. But he put, his nose to the grindstone and did more volume, trained with more volume, and then he figured out a way to recover with everything else he did, and it paid off. So,
yeah, I think one thing that is important, like you said, to follow a plan as it's written. I think that you have to have, you can't discover, and I'll tell you, with my perspective, having gone to art school and focused on art for a long time, you really have to get the rules down first. You have to understand the rules and follow them in order to learn how to break them.
Right. To learn when you should break them, right? Yeah. When it's time, okay, now it's time to go outside. Yeah, I had, there's some more on that too. It's interesting. Well, you could try a program. You're like, this is just too much. It's not right. And then maybe Nate was thinking of higher volume that way. And then you just say, well, hold on. This was written for a reason. Maybe it's not that the program's too much. It's that I'm shitty at configuring a life that will allow me to recover the way I should.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to train at a different time of day, or maybe I need to up my caloric intake, or maybe I need to stop futzing around on the computer at night and get better rest, or a number of things. So you may find literally, and I've done this in various ways. I'm kind of a fan of this approach. Is that when you sort of push past what you think you can do, you figure out actually what you're capable of. And it's like,
Yeah.
so you try too much training volume, like, oh, this is going to be too much. But it's like,
you really do.
I promised myself I'm going to stick this out for the 16 weeks of this program. What can I do to ensure that? And that's what I did with Derek. I'm like, what can I do to ensure that I can keep training with him? And I'm like, well, I got to fucking eat a lot of cereal. I know that. So, that's where I knew I need to eat enough.
Yeah.
And various other things. So you can learn by going in and doing something which you may balk at. And I've seen this so often. This is what, people, when they want to change things, this is what's going on, I think, a lot of times in their head. And another example of this, and this was a phone or a long distance consult from a while back now, but this person trying to figure out why he wasn't making progress.
Yeah.
And he was certain that he needed certain exercises, he needed hammer strength for whatever reason. Hammer strength's great, but he was having problem. It got to the point where, if I'm remembering this correctly, he was, and it's just the point that matters, but he was taking extra time traveling to a gym that made it such that sometimes he couldn't get there because he had to work late or what have you, because he wanted hammer strength. When he had a gym, he could be going to another gym with a different line of equipment and just training on that. And it was literally for the fact that he was latched on this idea that he has to use hammer strength.
Yeah.
He was missing workouts.
Wow.
And shooting himself in the foot. And it's like, dude, you have a great gym here that just doesn't have to, as they have Body Masters or Flex, or maybe, I don't think it was Arsenal. He probably would have liked Arsenal, but he's like, I got to have the hammer strength. Yeah. And it's like, no, you got to train.
Yeah.
First things first, train, and you'll figure out. So then he would have, and the thing is, the way I'm recalling this now too, is that that would have behooved him in terms of developing a better mind-muscle connection.
Sure.
Learning how to, make do with those machines.
Sure.
Or with just free weights.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my kind of summary is what to do with that little passage.
We had some cool comments here. Nick Weary had said, we all think that we're pushing it to the very fucking limit until we unlock a new one. That is so true, man. And we caught George at the perfect time. He just finished up his training, and he was doing a wind down on the bike after. So glad he can hang with us over there in the UK.
George.
I don't know how we would answer this one. Matt Blevins says, how often should we switch to a new novelty?
So that's a huge, as far as programs go, run them into the ground if you possibly can. Because I think from most people, that's sort of a first rule of thumb, because many people are going to they're going to want to program hop. So avoid the program hopping.
Yeah.
I think I addressed this in my book. It's hard to tell. I can't remember what I wrote in there. It's kind of everything every thought I have is in there pretty much. And then my other thought on it is, if you happen to know when you do a program that works, let's say like that research example, that 8 weeks on a given program gets you most of what you get, and the extra 8 weeks don't do you any good. Well, then use that to your advantage. It's just like DC training. If you're plateauing on with a load and a weight, you've got an exercise in your rotation, and this is how you do loading sets and Fortitude training. It's the same thing. It's basic, progressive overload rotating through exercise. And you're not making any progress, and you stall out for, let's say, 2 workouts, give it a third workout. If you don't make progress, it's time to change the exercise, find some novelty.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of being honest, and that's why the logbook's so good. The logbook's honest with you. Yeah. It's like the weight, It's like the I'm blanking on the
Rollins?
The Rockers.
Rollins?
Rollins quote. The weight never lies.
200 pounds is always 200 pounds.
200 pounds, yeah. And the logbook's telling you what you did.
Yeah.
And otherwise, you got to be honest with yourselves too. Like, do I have a psychological attachment to this way of training? It's such that I don't want to try something new.
Yeah.
So am I hanging in there, pounding away, doing what I've been doing and getting nothing out of it, or what I've been getting, which is nothing? And is it time for me to try something new? Or on the other end, am I constantly trying new things and program hopping and rotating the exercises when what I need to do is buckle down and just become a friggin' beast on the big movers?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
I think really, I mean, and this is, got to give Dante credit for perpetuating this idea and making this so well known, is if you just took someone and gave them give them 3 years or 5 years, and you're like, let's make you into a 600-pound deadlifter and a 500-pound squatter, and you can bench or incline press 315, you're going to be a big dude.
This is so true.
And if that's all you cared about, you trained as a bodybuilder, but you kept those basics in there and you got that strong, which most people could. I mean, if someone's 4'11", they're not going to be that big, You may need more if you're a bigger dude, but if you get brutally strong, and you eat to gain, and you're training as a bodybuilder, you're going to get brutally big. Yeah. You may not look like Phil Heath, but there's some relationship between all of that.
Yeah, you'll be your best you.
Are you looking to strategically cluster together microcycles of varying reps in reserve on exercises, blah blah blah? Like, have you overcomplicated shit to the point where you're missing the big picture, and that's to become a badass in the gym?
Yeah.
So you look like you can do what you do.
Yeah. Right.
Kind of where it comes down. I mean, really, bodybuilding is about looking overly impressive, and there's gonna be something behind it. Even if you look at the guys that are just genetically gifted, this is the interesting thing. Don't log shit. Look at how many amazing pro bodybuilders have you seen? I'm like, they're all like flashing through my head, who are on an incline pressing 405.
Yeah.
How many pros? I mean, I'm thinking Luke
yeah.
Sando and Ronnie Coleman and Dennis James, and James Hollingshead, and go through so many guys and some of those guys have used progressive overload and logbook things.
Right.
But some of them just I don't know that Dennis James ever logbooked anything.
Yeah, I don't know either.
He just trained like a madman and just got so that the other side of progressive overload is that your adaptation to the stimulus means you get stronger. That's the fun part.
Yeah.
You come to the gym because what you did made you better.
Yeah.
And then it manifests in your performance. And for someone who's genetically gifted, they don't have to steer the stimulus with logbooking or counting reps in reserve or whatever. They just go in there and they just apply it with a broad stroke, and the other side of the progressive overload coin manifests, and they make gains. But they're still making gains. They're still getting bigger and stronger, so they still end up, in most cases, there's pros that people say, oh, they're not that, they're kind of wimped out in the gym. They were never very impressive. But even those guys are pretty strong.
Yeah.
So you just may have to be, if you're not a genetically gifted person, recognize the big pictures that you gotta move the big weights for big reps one way or another to some degree relative to what you're capable of. No one should go and try to incline press 405 today if they're not doing something close to that. In fact, it's probably not a good idea for anyone, just as a general suggestion. But looks like we're getting comments. I'm seeing you.
We're getting a few, but I was gonna switch gears here. We had a listener viewer. He asked us to do a physique critique, and he specifically asked if you would do it, Scott. We've been doing a few of them off and on over at Blood, Sweat, and Gear. And let me see here. I'm just grabbing his pictures together. This is from Brandon. And let me just kind of read his message here. He says, 26 years old, he's 6'3", he's 206 pounds. He did bodybuilding style workouts starting in high school with his dad, since John Meadows inspired him to have a passion for bodybuilding years ago. Yeah, I guess John got his dad into training. He says he's down there in Ohio. He says, built a decent physique until almost 2 years ago. I let myself go and I got really fat. Then this past year, I've gone into bodybuilding and gotten myself back on track with the help of the knowledge you, Dr. Scott, and the other awesome co-hosts at the shows have put out. but especially Christmas cabbage. So he's a fan of listening to drugs and stuff.
Everyone pales comparison.
He says, I currently work a manual job, 4 10-hour days a week, and train an hour daily with 2 days off per week. Started TRT a year and a half ago, and this past summer began trying out different compounds in small mini blasts to see how I react to them before using them in a contest prep setting. Says he's currently 1 month into my growth phase, and I'd like to do my first competition a year from now if possible, but I know I need to put on a lot of muscle. Would love to hear you guys' thoughts and advice going forward. Not sure what division to compete in either. Probably classic physique or men's physique for the first show, but since I most likely won't have enough mass for the open class. Appreciate any feedback, and I can't wait for Christmas to receive Dr. Scott's book from my girlfriend to really get into my bodybuilding journey. So he has some. This is not necessarily his physique critique picture, but he shows us his progress. I'm going to put that one up first. This is as he got back into it. So he's made a lot of fat loss progress there, huh?
It's a lot of weight, man. 59 pounds.
So he's lost a lot of fat, which is, I'd say first of all, he's gotten himself into a great position to now grow muscle, right?
Yeah.
Having gotten all that fat off. Yep. 6'3", 206 pounds.
Right.
Here is a front shot where he stands currently. And let's see. I'm going to see if he's got a back shot here. He's got a back shot here. I wonder if I can just drag this straight in. Looks like I can. So here's a couple shots of him where he stands at this moment.
Okay, so he was wanting sort of like a general physique critique.
Yeah, pretty much. He's looking for any kind of pointers we can give him based off of what we're seeing here.
He's got good balance. I mean, everyone can use more of everything, basically.
True.
You can almost like even, Tom Platt's, legs were. Was he out of balance? I don't know. It looked fucking awesome.
Right?
So, but he's actually really, really well balanced. I have the sense he's got really good back width. And it's hard to tell he hasn't shaved his back, but he looks like he could use some thickness there. You can see his erectors look big, but there's just sort of almost a hollowed out area, and maybe it's just the way he's posing and the way his scapulae are lying against his rib cage. But it actually looks like he may have some scoliosis, to be honest.
Really?
See how I mean, this is not a diagnosis, but he may be able to confirm. I don't know if he's watching, listening now, but look in the picture where he's facing the rear, facing the door. He looks like he's taller in that one too, by the way. Look where his head is relative to the door.
Oh yeah, it's a slightly different angle.
Yeah, something.
You know what? He sent another. He sent a few pictures. Here's just another variation.
Before you remove
back.
that one, because that's the one I can see this on.
I wanted to throw this one up for you too, since it was just a different variation of the back, and I didn't know if maybe that would give you any more insight into what you were already looking at.
Yeah. Well, it looks like you see if you look you can sort of see his spine between his paraspinal musculature. Mm-hmm. And now you can't see the bigger picture was better to see this. But there's a kind of a curve to the left.
Okay.
It's concave to the left.
Okay.
And the trap's a little uneven.
Okay.
So he may not be able to be. He may not be able to do some of the deadlifting, rack dead, bent over row types of things. Maybe I'm totally off, but he's doing manual labor, so who knows? That could be a function of being a righty, and he's doing all sorts of stuff with his right side. But he's really well balanced, and I think it looks like anterior delts actually could use a little bit more.
Okay.
Just filling in the upper chest. This is just the stuff that everybody is missing. This is basic, like everyone. Legs are a strong point, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially for someone that his thighs.
Yeah, even from the back, a lot of times if guys can build his legs, it's like the hamstrings don't come up. But his hamstrings actually seem to have some density. Like from behind, his legs look wide.
Yeah, they do. I agree. It's hard to tell. He's got a little blurriness. Maybe someone that wasn't a timer camera. It looks like in the front shot. I'm trying to look at his calves. Can't quite tell how developed his calves are.
Let's see if I
Um,
can bring
See how it's
that up a
blurred
little
there?
bigger.
Like someone, maybe that's just all shadows. Okay,
I think
yeah,
there's
so you
some
could bring the
shadow
calves
there.
up a little bit. Yeah, it's shadows. I couldn't tell if it was a shakiness or shadows.
Okay.
That's probably a flash plus a light gave him a double shadow effect.
Yeah.
But he's got a nice taper. He's got good width. I think he's got broad, so he's got a good skeletal structure. I think he just needs more of everything everywhere.
Yeah, I
Generally.
would totally agree, man. I mean, it's a great start, and having lost all that fat, he's going to be in a much better position to grow muscle. I think
Yeah.
that if he spends, and he said he wants to compete in a year. I mean, realistically, even if you're pushing things to the extreme and you've got your diet nailed down and everything, I mean, he said he trained for a lot of his life though. So, and if he hasn't trained for a couple of years, he might come back fast. Like he might grow quickly, but
Yeah.
it's no matter what, it's gonna take time, especially in a taller guy who's gonna need to fill out a lot of muscle. I feel like it'll take him some time. But I agree with you, man. He's got like a good overall balance. It's just more of, I'd say the keys are for all of us are always going to be chest, back, and legs. With the heavy compound movements. If you can get a lot
Yeah.
of rows in there, a lot of heavy chest presses, a lot of squat type movements, those things are all going to keep growing. And with that, his shoulders seem like they're pretty strong already. Like they seem like,
Yeah. He's got good roundness.
yeah, I can see
Yeah.
it just keep coming up from there, man.
So the issue he has now is, and this is maybe why he's wanted to ask this question, is now he's what does he do now?
Yeah.
He just dropped 59 pounds, and he wants to compete in a year. Does he grow, or does he keep on leaning out, or is he sort of repartitioning right now as he goes along? If he's the next step, I think this is maybe what he's wanting, or this is what I would be sort of focusing on if he came to me as a client is look at his training history. Like, is he making progress in the gym still, which suggests he's gaining muscle mass? Because he knows how to lift. He lifted for his entire life. So that came back pretty fast,
Yeah.
literally remembering how to move. So if he's still progressing in the gym, that's a good sign. And want to know what his diet's like and how hard it was to drop this fat. So like, did he get to here and he's like, living on 1,300 calories a day and doing, protein and veggie days and that kind of stuff? Or is he still at 2,500 calories?
Yeah.
So, kind of want to know where he's at. I tell you what, like literally, it depends on what level he's at and how hard he wants to push things. The other thing we don't know too. So these are all like, you can learn so much from the past. In all those years of lifting, I guess he was natural. I don't know, but so now he's on TRT and he's adding in things one at a time, which is a really good approach to see how he reacts to each of them.
Yeah.
So how much is he getting from that? Let he go for 6 months and then he added those in and all of a sudden results were like 3 times as fast, or like, wow, this is just crazy? Or is it like, okay, that seemed like it helped a little bit, and I see my fat loss was maybe a little enhanced and I got a boost of strength in the gym, but it wasn't like, oh shit, I'm Captain America now or something like that.
Yeah.
So that kind of is going to determine where he wants to go. So let's say, without hearing back from him, let's say he's like, I want to be an IFBB pro bodybuilder. So right now he doesn't have that muscle mass, but that's a totally different mindset in terms of what he may want to do and what he may be willing to do and where he wants to go. It's like, now I'm going to figure out how these compounds work for me. And then I'm going to, push the limits, and I'm at 6'3", he's going to have to get to 300 pounds, to be a pro. That's 100 pounds above where he is,
Yeah. That's a lot.
But on the other end of the spectrum, he can get on stage, and because he's got good, I think he's being tall is tough. But it depends on if he just wants to like bring a really solid, ripped, shredded physique to the stage and just just kick some ass, not necessarily beat anyone that, has better structure than him or genetics, but just like kick some major ass. He could, spend the next 6 months to try to get himself up to 225 and then diet down, back to around 200 and be shredded.
Yeah.
And just fucking diced.
I'll tell you what, even if a guy's not big,
okay.
yeah, even if a guy's not big on stage, if he comes in absolutely peeled, he'll still get respect, you know?
Yeah. So, you know, in Classic, he's got kind of the Classic shorts on there. In Classic, I don't know what the 6'3" limit is.
He'll have tons of room. He'll have tons of room because I know guys I work with at like 5'10", their cutoff is around 200 pounds. So
yeah,
you know, he'll easily be 225 easy.
Yeah. So I think it's time, you know, now if he's solid that he gained that weight because he just kind of let himself go, and who knows what life circumstance. But he's not someone who's, I think, fat phobic. Yeah. So he could maybe reverse gears. And the thing to kind of know where to go, and I just was interacting with someone about this the other day. It's in my book, kind of as a, it's actually, I think it's really, really helpful, is figure out how much fat mass he has and how much fat-free mass he has. It's gonna have to be 4% on stage. So let's say he's 10% right now. Okay. So, and he's 206. So that's roughly 20 pounds of fat, maybe 21 pounds of fat. So he's got 197 pounds of fat-free mass, or 187 pounds of fat-free mass.
That sounds right. Yeah.
So yeah, if he dieted down right now, he might be at 4%. You know, he'd be in the middle 190s, something like that, or low 190s probably.
Assuming he didn't lose any additional glycogen stores in size in the process. Yeah. You know.
So. That is where he is, and if he thinks, you know, I think I need another 10 pounds of stage weight, then he's going to probably have to gain twice that in body weight, roughly. Kind of depends on what happens and how he responds to everything. You know, you never know how many levers he presses, so to speak, and how he responds to those. But so he may, you know, do that now, and then he may have to move back up weight wise and try to get those. If he wants 10 pounds. Then that might take another year, and then diet down the next year. If he just like getting lean and looking good, and like once you strip off like that, go from 10, 11, 12% body fat to 4%, you can look so different.
Oh, for sure, man.
Especially in person. So that may be where he wants to go.
Yeah.
But you're right. He's got a great spot. It kind of depends on. He doesn't know what division he'd fit into. Well, what's your first show? Just do them all. Do all the ones you can.
Yeah. I mean, and you don't have to decide now either, too. You know, grow, get as much. Obviously, whatever he decides, he still should try, of course, to grow as much muscle as possible because he's going to need more size for any of them, right? So, you know, and you can make that decision as you get closer. Hell, you can really make that decision the day of the show if you needed to. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't need to have that. You can pay for the show and decide last minute, hey, I decided I wanted to do men's physique instead of classic.
At the weigh-ins.
At the
weigh-ins. Exactly. He'll want to pose.
Yeah, of course.
He will have his posing down. So it's like, oh, shit, what are the poses in classic again? You know? Or like, because men's physique is totally different. But yeah, so it's, I mean, like another sort of lens to view this all through is if he's natural, then like let's just say he were natural in this position, just one end of the spectrum, he's got a totally different scenario. If he goes another year, you know, he's been training for his whole life. He's not getting newbie gains anymore. Yeah. You know, he might be able to come on stage, you know, with another 2 or 4 pounds of muscle, something like that. Yeah. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, if he's been natural now, and he wants to just like test things out now for a while and then like, you know, crank it out full blast, and he responds well, then he could transform himself, you know, in a way which would put him in a totally different level of competition. Yeah. Potentially. We don't know this. You don't know how well he responds.
True.
So the trajectories are manifold, so to speak. He could be going all sorts of different ways, depending on where along that, you know, natty to, you know, full blown spectrum he wants to be. So
yeah, I think one thing I'll throw in there, and I know this may not be something you would say, so I'm going to say it, is that gear wise, you know, he said he's been kind of lightly experimenting with like a little bit mini kind of growth phases with the gear. Little tiny bit here, little tiny bit there, just kind of dipping his toes, it sounds like, so that when he gets to his prep, he can understand how he responds to compounds. I think that's a great idea. At the same time, you got time to grow, and I do feel like really committing to an off-season cycle, like not just dipping your toes, but like actually running, like, hey, getting to like, off-season content or off-season cycle. Like there's going to be like, if I've seen people who are like, hey, I'm just taking a little bit of D-ball for a short period of time. I don't know how effective that is compared to like running a real dose for 6 weeks kind of thing.
Depends on the person.
It does. It does, but I'm going to speak just like, and I'm kind of speaking in general. I would say on average, the average person, would do well with an actual cycle for a good 10, 12 weeks, like committing to like a test cycle of whatever it is, 400 milligrams, 500 milligrams.
Yeah.
And of course I'm making that number up, but I would say on average, a guy who wants to start cycling, if he ran 500 milligrams at test for 10 weeks, is going to make some incredible gains. Obviously there's more to it than just that, estrogen control and nutrition and the training, all of that stuff. But I think that if you just kind of are dipping your toes a little bit here and there and seeing how you respond, you may not get as much out of your off season as if you were to like give it a little gusto for a period of time. And then before you got to that dieting phase, I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah. There's no doubt that, where he is now, he would get more out of going to 2 grams a week than if he went to 1 gram a week.
Sure.
It's just like,
sure.
I mean, at this point, you can only grow so fast, but over the course of a year, I think there's more is like with some limits, of course, but a gram versus a half a gram, let's say.
Yeah.
So it all depends on like, does he want to be able to, after like the show, be fully recovered and be certain that he is, because that's always an unknown.
Well, he's on TRT now, so.
So okay. I didn't know if people say that. I don't even assume that it's prescription.
Yeah.
Anymore.
When I do, I just assume they're committed for a lifelong, lifestyle of now they're on test. So yeah, he said last year and a half he's been on TRT. So a little young for TRT, but hey, it's there's a lot of variables in there, I guess.
Yeah, it's just so. Because the thing, you remember the podcast we did with Casey way back when?
Of course.
Where he talked about the Russian guy.
Yeah.
That he knew, who did what this listener is doing, and he tested out how he responded to these different. So I don't know what he just said. He's dabbling. We might be right. It might be like, okay, 5 milligrams of D-ball Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's probably not going to matter too much,
Yeah.
But maybe he's doing like 50. Maybe he's got some, like and that's not a ton, but that'll hit you.
Oh yeah.
If that's a new stimulus for you.
Hell
so,
yeah.
So maybe he does that for 4 weeks, and then he goes to, maybe he just tries, then he tries an injectable at like 300 on top of his TRT, and then he pulls that, and then he tries another like 2 weeks of an oral, and they're sizable amounts, enough to progress from. And he's like, okay, this one fucking lost my hair in like 3 days. Like my hair is like falling out. Like I'm not doing that, And the other one is like, okay, I started getting itchy nipples, and Novadex didn't work, so that's not working. But when I use this, oh shit, I felt great. Sex drive was high. I was making gains. My training was the best ever. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So it could be that he's using enough where he might be like, you know what? I think this is fine for the first go round, because I want to be able to do this for the next 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm going to get the most from the least, which I always say.
Yeah.
And you're totally right. Like more is going to give him more, I think.
Yeah. Well, and I'm not saying like, you got to run a lot, but it's almost like if we were to talk training, you got to commit to a training plan for a period of time, and you really have to give it a go. And so assuming the way I read it, if he's kind of dabbling, it's kind of like if you're dabbling with progressive overload for a few weeks, and then you go to this for a few, like, I just think that you might be better off. Like, let's focus on an off season. Let's focus on growing. Let's get some test in there, maybe some EQ, some DECA. I don't know, but like really commit to it, and to really understand how you respond. I think it can be a series of years. Like, You might be better off. Like this year, you're experimenting with test and EQ for your off season. And maybe next year you decide you didn't like that, or maybe you did and you do it again. But don't forget, man, like there is going to be this phase is important for making progress. And so committing to training, committing to eating, and committing to the gear really too, is all going to be important factors.
Here's the thing, because I think when people talk about training and gear, the way if they don't tell you the specifics, what you get is that people will underplay the gear use and they will overplay the training maybe in general. So he may be, and this is an accusation, but when someone says, I'm kind of happy to hear someone say they're dabbling in gear, because most people use more than they should probably need.
That's
to.
true. That is true.
So I'm like, oh, this is good. So that if I take this, because we don't know, he didn't say any amounts, but I take this like, okay, this is good. Like a dabble nowadays is like, that's a hefty dose, right?
Yeah, that's true, man. Maybe he's like,
what I'm thinking.
I'm dabbling 600 test, 500
EQ. Likely to
hear,
like, I train like an absolute animal and I just use minimal amounts of gear, or I use all the gear I can get my hands on and I train like a pussy.
That's a very valid point, isn't it?
So that's kind of like, I don't know if that's my like experience, like being around for a while. It's like, so
what
are you taking? It's like, I'm taking everything under the sun. Like I'm just little amounts of it, but it all adds up to like 3 grams a week.
Yeah.
So I think, it could be that he is using something that's getting him, he's in a sweet spot, for making gains. He's not like undershooting like you said, because like an issue there literally physiologically would be you're using enough to really kind of shut yourself down if you want to be able to. Well, he's on TRT, so that's not a problem, but you're using something that's not going to get you anything, because it's not enough.
Yeah.
To get so maybe you just get sides, It could be noticeable sides.
Or I've even seen where like 10 milligrams of D-ball is enough to really feel it. Like I feel like I can tell when I take 10 milligrams of D-ball, but cumulatively, how much am I going to progress from that compared to like 500 test and 50 D-ball? Obviously, there's a limit there, and like you said, you could go to why not 2,000 test and 100 D-ball, but reasonable. There's a minimal effective dose, I think, to make optimal progress, to make it worth your investment of money, your investment of time.
Yeah, it may be too, because there's so many ways this could be actually playing out.
True.
You think about how many times have you heard? I know you've listened to and done so many interviews. You hear about like a pro who's a pro, who you just kind of, because they're a pro, they have good, they've got good genetics, because they became, the rise to pro status was pretty rapid.
Yeah.
It didn't take them, they didn't get their pro card when they were in their 50s or something like that. And like, what was your first cycle? It's like, oh, I just took, 50 milligrams of nandrolone 3 times a week.
Yeah.
And they grew 25 pounds, something like that, So he may be trying to figure out if he's in that category. He's probably not. He would have known, because he would have been a really exceptional bodybuilder as a natural way back when, probably. Yeah. But anyway, you don't know. So yeah, we both got very good valid points without knowing what he's at. But yeah, commit yourself to whatever you're trying to do. But my main thing is to know your parameters and know like what it is that you want, because if his goals are everything, really. If his goal is to like just go for it and just like, I'm going to give myself 5 years, like we hear that often. I'm going to give myself 5 years to try to see how far I can rise in these ranks.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do everything, monitor my blood work, take care of that. I'll do it. If his goal is, if he doesn't have a goal, then my thought is that it makes sense to me, at least with people that I work with, I want to have goals before you take the step of using drugs, and the potential sides and negatives that may come with those.
Yeah.
Because, it's a powerful tool, and with, as Spider-Man's dad said, with great power comes great responsibility and hopefully a good goal to match.
Yeah. That is a great point, man.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, I wanted to close on this comment because I thought this was really nice from Luke. And he says, good afternoon, gentlemen. Just finished listening to the last Muscle Minds. Just got to say that I love how humble you are, Scott. It blows my mind how much you know, and you will still say that you aren't an expert after being in the industry for centuries, literally for centuries.
I'm laughing.
Yeah. But there are so many people who have been training for a year max who act like they know everything. There is always more to learn. I thought that was a really nice comment, so I wanted to make sure I got that up here.
That is cool. And you wonder, because I mean, I wish I could go back and talk to myself way back when. Maybe I was a brash asshole who thought he knew everything back in the day, and finally I figured, like, I don't know shit. Because the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. That's the sort of way it's always been to me.
That is so true, isn't it?
Wonderful, But that's a cool. Thank you, Luke. I appreciate that compliment.
All right. Well, listen, let's get out of here, guys. Of course, thank you for watching. If you want to support our programming, you can do so by shopping with our sponsors. We are sponsored by True Nutrition. They've been with us for a number of years. I'm so grateful for them because they do have high quality supplements and everything is tested, and you can get just about anything that you need, from protein powders, intra workouts, peri-workout, basically performance nutrition, to health supplements. And if you use our code THINK, that will give you a small discount, and it'll let them know that you are supporting our programming. Of course, we're brought to you for our Canadian people by supplementsource.ca. They have great blowout deals on all sorts of supplements. So definitely just check the site out if you guys are in Canada. You get a lot of stuff there. Ephedrine, you can get
your daily ephedrine.
You got to make sure you take, as Scott prescribes, 3 tabs a day. Scott is a doctor, and that's his prescription. As a medical doctor,
this shit out. you got to be careful. People are entire YouTube channels based on like trying to catch people saying shit they shouldn't say.
Yeah. Well, anybody who takes me serious when I say that, you guys have got a lot to learn in life. You got a lot to learn in life, that's for sure. Right. And like many of our listeners have, you guys can learn a lot more from Scott by checking out his books. Fortitude training is a great plan. We discussed that today. It's literally like $20, and it will give you a lifetime of gains. So seriously though, check that out, and check out the book, BeYourOwnBodybuildingCoach.com, like we discussed earlier today. I'll have links to everything down below, guys. We appreciate you guys watching. And Scott, this will be our last show before Christmas, so I want to say Merry Christmas to you, my friend.
Oh, yeah. Same to you, Scott. And congratulations. I guess we should say this, it's on the boards, but congratulations on being a taken man.
Yes. I am taken. I'm officially
totally
taken.
Are.
And I couldn't be happier. It's definitely a marriage made in heaven is what it'll be. So I'm grateful.
Yeah. And I'm glad you get to spend time together, and the border is allowing you guys to just do what 2 lovebirds should do, and that's be together.
Especially for Christmas. Man. Yes. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, guys, for another episode of Muscle Minds with Scott Stevenson, I'm Scott McNally. We will see you soon. Thanks, Scott.